Get your hands where I can see them. Both of you. Right now. That was the first thing Cornelius Osei-Darko heard when he walked through the front door of Vantage Private Banking on Bay Street. Not good afternoon. Not welcome. The first words spoken to him in a voice loud enough for every person in that marble lobby to turn and stare were those, and Cornelius did not move. He stood exactly where he was, one hand still resting on the door handle, his other hand holding a soft leather portfolio that had seen better days. He looked at the man who had spoken, a security guard named Barrett, according to his badge, white, mid-40s. The kind of man who had decided very early in life that a uniform was the same thing as authority. And he said nothing. His wife, Josephine Osei-Darko, stood beside him. She was wearing the same coat she always wore on Tuesdays. Camel wool, slightly worn at the left elbow. Her reading glasses were pushed up on her head. She had been carrying a Tim Hortons cup because they had been running late, and she hadn't finished her coffee. She set it down carefully on the ledge near the door, as if she already knew this was going to take a while. Now, if you've ever walked into a room and felt the air change, felt every eye find you in a way that makes your skin feel like it belongs to someone else, then you know exactly what that lobby felt like for the next 30 seconds. Nobody spoke. A young associate near the reception desk looked at her screen very intently. A client in a gray suit studied his phone. The receptionist, a woman named Pamela who would later give a statement to HR, picked up her pen and wrote nothing. Barrett took 3 steps forward. I'm going to need you both to come with me. Cornelius still had not moved. That was the thing people would talk about later. How still he was. Not frozen, not afraid. Still in the way a person is still when they have already decided what they are going to do, and what they are going to do is absolutely nothing because they don't have to. He was 61 years old. He had driven in from Oakville that morning. He was wearing dark trousers, a shirt that was clean but not pressed, and a jacket that had a small coffee stain near the second button that Josephine had pointed out 3 times by that week. He did not look like what most people in that building imagined when they pictured the name on the account. He looked like someone's grandfather. He looked like someone who might be waiting to pick up a form or ask about exchange rates. He did not look like a man who had held an account at Vantage Private Banking for 22 years, whose portfolio under management exceeded $4.3 million, and who had a 9 o'clock appointment with the branch director to discuss a trust restructuring for his grandchildren. But here is what you need to understand. Cornelius already knew that. He had known it for decades, and he had learned, over all those decades, that the most dangerous thing you can do in a room like that is reach into your pocket too fast. So he didn't reach, he waited. Sir. Barrett's voice had dropped now, the way voices drop when someone realizes the volume was a mistake, but isn't ready to admit the whole thing was a mistake. Sir, I'm going to need you to step outside. We've had reports. Reports, Cornelius said. It wasn't a question. He just repeated the word, quietly, the way you repeat something, to let the other person hear how it sounds. There have been reports of individuals entering the building without authorization. Barrett, a woman's voice, from across the lobby, sharp, professional, coming from a woman named Diane Kowalczyk, who was the branch's client relations manager, and who had, in that moment, gone approximately the color of uncooked pastry. He was walking very quickly, which in heels on marble sounds like a very specific kind of panic. Barrett, that is enough. Barrett turned. Diane was already positioned between him and the Osei-Darkos, which took some doing because Barrett was a large man, and Diane was not. But she had the posture of someone who had handled situations like this before and was deeply, fundamentally tired of it. Mr. Osei-Darko. She turned to face him, and her voice shifted entirely. Warm, professional, controlled. I am so sorry. I am so sorry for this. Please come in. Please, both of you, come in and sit down. Harrington is expecting you. There is a moment, in situations like this, where the person who has been wronged has a choice. Cornelius had been in that moment before. He had been in rooms where the air shifted, and people remembered, too late, who they were actually looking at. He had learned something about those moments. He had learned that the way you move through them says more about your character than anything that came before. He nodded to Diane. He turned to Josephine. She had already picked her Tim Hortons cup back up. "Shall we?" he said. They walked across the lobby together, Cornelius and Josephine Osei-Darko, and not one person in that room said a word. Now, before we go further, there are things you need to know about Cornelius, because none of what happened that day makes sense without them. And stick with the story, because where this goes, what Barrett was about to discover about himself, his employment, and the consequences of a single bad morning, that is the part nobody in that building forgot. Cornelius was born in Kumasi, Ghana, in 1964. His father had been a school teacher. His mother ran a small cloth stall at the market on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and she kept the accounts herself in a ledger that she covered in brown paper every year so it looked new. Cornelius used to sit beside her while she worked, not because she asked him to, but because the numbers interested him. The way a column balanced. The way nothing was hidden if you looked carefully enough. He came to Canada in 1988 on a student visa, enrolled at the University of Waterloo in actuarial science, and stayed. He got his credentials. He worked for a mid-size insurance firm in Kitchener for 6 years, learned the industry from the inside out, moved to Toronto, and by 1999, he had co-founded a small actuarial consulting firm with a woman named Peggy Drummond, who was one of the sharpest people he had ever met, and who is still his business partner to this day. They built it slowly, carefully, the way his mother had kept her ledger. Nothing hidden if you look carefully enough. By 2008, they had 30 employees. By 2015, they had 64. By the morning Barrett told Cornelius Osei-Darko to put his hands where he could see them. The firm had 91 full-time staff, offices in Toronto and Calgary, and a client list that included 3 of the largest pension funds in Ontario. Josephine had her own story. She had been an emergency room nurse for 27 years at Hamilton General before she moved into healthcare administration. And she had the specific brand of patience that ER nurses develop. The kind that is not gentle, exactly, but is unshakable. She had held the hands of people who were dying. She had told families things no one ever wants to say. A security guard in a bank lobby was, on her personal scale of difficult things, somewhere around a 2 out of 10. Which is why she finished her coffee. Diane Kowalczyk walked them to the private meeting room on the 2nd floor, talking the entire way. She was apologizing, explaining, using phrases like absolutely unacceptable and not reflective of our values, and I want to assure you both. Cornelius listened. He had heard those phrases before too. The room had a long table and a window that looked out over Bay Street, and a small credenza with a coffee service that nobody had touched. There was a man already standing when they entered, tall, dark suit, early 50s, with the kind of handshake that people practice. This was Elliot Harrington, branch director, who had been Cornelius's primary contact at Vantage for the past 9 years. Harrington shook his hand, then Josephine's. His face was composed, but his eyes were doing something complicated. He had clearly already been told, "Cornelius, Josephine, thank you for coming. I heard there was an incident downstairs, and I want you to know, Elliot." Cornelius sat down, put his portfolio on the table, folded his hands on top of it. "Let's talk about the trust." Harrington blinked. "Of course, yes, absolutely." He sat across from him, opened his folder. That was the thing. Cornelius didn't want an apology in a meeting room. He'd been given apologies in meeting rooms before. He had come to discuss the restructuring of an educational trust for his 4 grandchildren, which was why he had driven in from Oakville on a Tuesday morning in November. And that was what he intended to do. But the thing about what Barrett had done, the thing that doesn't go away with an apology in a meeting room, was that it hadn't happened in private. It had happened in a lobby full of people. It had been loud, deliberate, and every person who had looked away, who had studied their phone or their screen or their pen, while a 61-year-old man was told to put his hands up in his own bank. Every single one of them had made a choice. Diane stood near the door for a moment, then quietly left. Barrett's name was Gordon Barrett. He had worked for a security contractor called Sentinel Shield Solutions for 11 years. He had been assigned to Vantage Private Banking on Bay Street for the last 3. And in those 3 years, he had developed what he privately considered a reliable instinct for who belonged in a private banking lobby and who didn't. He was wrong about this. He had always been wrong about this, but nobody had ever said so directly, which is the problem with instincts that go uncorrected. He had not, by the way, received any report of suspicious individuals. That detail, reports plural, official sounding, he had produced from somewhere inside himself in the moment, the way people sometimes reach for justifications that feel like reasons. The lobby had been quiet. He had seen a black man in an unremarkable jacket walk through the door, and he had moved. That is the whole of it. By 11:30 that morning, Diane Kowalczyk had filed an internal incident report. By 1 o'clock, Sentinel Shield Solutions had received a formal complaint from Vantage's client relations team. By 3:15, Harrington had made a call to the regional VP that lasted 40 minutes. Cornelius had not asked for any of this. He had asked for nothing except the meeting he had scheduled. But institutions, when they perceive a liability, have their own momentum. And Vantage Private Banking, which managed $4.3 million on behalf of the Osei-Darko family, perceived a significant one. Pamela at reception, it turned out, had been recording on her phone from the moment Barrett raised his voice. She had said nothing. She had not intervened. But she had pressed record quietly with her phone flat on the desk, and she gave the video to Diane at 11 o'clock without being asked. The video was 47 seconds long. In it, you could see Cornelius standing completely still. You could hear Barrett's voice. You could hear the lobby go quiet. You could see in the background every person who chose not to look. Now, at this point in the story, some people would have walked away. They would have had the meeting, taken the apology, gotten back in the car to Oakville. Life is long. There are grandchildren to think about. Josephine had a board meeting at 3. Cornelius thought about all of this. He thought about it on the drive home, while Josephine slept in the passenger seat, with her coat pulled up and her reading glasses still on her head. He thought about his mother's ledger. He thought about what she used to say to him when he was 10, 11, 12 years old, sitting beside her at the market on Saturday mornings. She used to say, "If someone makes a mistake, you correct it. If someone makes a habit of it, you document it." He thought about the other people who walked into that lobby on other Tuesdays. People who did not have Harrington's direct line. People who did not have Diane Kowalczyk walking quickly across a marble floor. People for whom the lobby was just the lobby, and Barrett was just the man who told them to leave, and they left. That was the part he couldn't set down. He contacted a lawyer named Anthea Covington Reid 3 days later. She had an office in Mississauga and a reputation in human rights law that Cornelius's colleague, Peggy, had mentioned twice over the past few years in contexts that had nothing to do with this. Peggy had good judgment about people. Cornelius called her. Anthea listened to everything. She listened the way good lawyers listen, without a lot of expression, taking notes on a yellow legal pad, asking occasionally for a date or a name. When he was done, she looked at her notes for a moment. "You mentioned she had a video," Anthea said. "I was told there was video, yes. And did you ask for a copy?" "I didn't." "Okay." She wrote something down. "You don't have to decide anything today, but I want you to understand what you have here if you choose to use it." What he had, Anthea explained, was a formal complaint under the Ontario Human Rights Code on the grounds of discrimination in the provision of services based on race. He had a video. He had an incident report filed by the bank's own staff. He had a security contractor with no documented policy on racial bias training. And he had 47 seconds of a lobby full of people who had looked away. The bank, Anthea said, is going to want to resolve this quietly. Cornelius nodded. "I know. My question," she said, "is what you want." He looked out the window of her office. There was a parking lot outside, and past it a strip mall, and past that a gray November sky. He thought about what his mother had said. "Document it. I want it on the record," he said. "I want it to be official and documented, and I want every step of it to be visible, not quiet." Anthea nodded slowly. "Then we'll make it visible. Before we get to what happened, and stay with us. Because what happened to Barrett and to Sentinel Shield Solutions is not a small thing. You should know that Josephine had something to say about all of this. She had not said it in the car on the way home. She had not said it that evening when Cornelius sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold and a legal pad of his own in front of him. She had not said it the next morning. She said it on the third morning when he came downstairs and she was already at the table with her own tea and the newspaper, and she looked up and said, "You're going to do this properly." It wasn't a question. "Yes," he said. "Good." She went back to her newspaper. Then, without looking up, because someone has to. That is the thing about Josephine that people don't always understand right away. She did not perform her feelings. She did not make them large or visible or easy to read. What she felt, she carried in a specific and deliberate way. 27 years in an emergency room will do that to a person. It will teach you that the most useful thing, most of the time, is to be steady. But underneath that steadiness, she had been furious since Tuesday. The formal complaint was filed in January. It named Gordon Barrett individually, and Sentinel Shield Solutions as his employer, and the party responsible for his conduct and training. It named Vantage Private Banking for the conduct of the incident and for the environment in which it occurred. What happened next unfolded over 8 months, which is the ordinary pace of these things, and not all of it can be told here. But here is what matters. Sentinel Shield Solutions, when faced with the complaint and the video and the incident report from the bank's own staff, conducted an internal review. The review found that Barrett had received no formal anti-bias training in his 3 years at the Vantage location. It found that no documentation of the incident had been made by Sentinel on the day it occurred. It found 3 prior complaints in Barrett's file from other locations, none of which had resulted in formal disciplinary action. Barrett was terminated in February. He challenged the termination and lost. Vantage Private Banking reached a settlement with the Osei-Darko family that involved, among other things, a financial component that Anthea Covington-Reid described as appropriate, and that Cornelius described, when pressed, as not the point, but fair. As part of the settlement, Vantage committed to a partnership with a civil rights organization to develop new protocols for their lobby, staff, and security contractors. Protocols that would, for the first time, be written down. Pamela at reception received a commendation from the bank's HR department for providing the video. She had not expected this. She cried a little, which she mentioned to a colleague, and then wished she hadn't. The video was never posted publicly. Cornelius had not wanted that, and Josephine had agreed. What they wanted was what he had told Anthea. Official, documented, visible. And it was. There is something Cornelius said to a journalist from a Hamilton newspaper who reached out after the settlement became partially public through the Human Rights Tribunal process. He said it quietly, the way he said most things. The journalist wrote it down. He said, "I have walked into rooms like that one my entire life. What changes is not the rooms. What changes is whether anyone decides to write it down." He said it, and then he went back to work. 91 employees, 3 of the largest pension funds in Ontario, a trust for 4 grandchildren that had been properly restructured and filed in March. Josephine's board meeting, which she had made it to on time. Nothing about any of that was small. Nothing about any of that was visible to Gordon Barrett when he made his decision in that lobby. And that, in the end, is the whole of the story. Not the size of the man, but the size of the mistake of not seeing him. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the rooms you walk into and the people you overlook, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. We read every single one. And if you haven't subscribed to Birthright Tales yet, now would be a good time. We'll be back with another story very soon.